At the altar, the man I was about to marry looked me in the eyes and said, "Sorry, I can't marry you. She's my true love." The room fell silent. But instead of tears, I smiled. Then I leaned forward and whispered, "If she's your true love, why is she walking down the aisle with my dad?" His face drained of all color. And trust me, what happened next will leave you speechless. Stay with me until the end, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The day was supposed to be perfect, the kind of fairy tale moment little girls dream about when they imagine walking down the aisle. The church smelled of lilies, candles flickered against stained glass, and every eye was on me. My dress shimmered under the chandelier as the music slowed. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. My heart was a drum in my chest as I stepped toward him, my groom, my promised forever. But when I reached the altar, his fingers trembled in mine. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper yet loud enough for the world to hear, he leaned close and said words that shattered the room. "I'm sorry, I can't marry you, she's my true love." Gasps rippled through the guests. My bridesmaids froze, jaws slack. His mother clutched her pearls, already pale with shame. I stood there, veil draped across my face, staring at the man who was supposed to be mine. For a second, the world spun. If he thought I hadn't known, he was wrong. If he thought he was breaking me, he had no idea what was coming next. I tilted my head toward him, letting my voice carry through the silent church. "Then why is she walking down the aisle with my dad?" My words cut like glass, sharp enough to draw blood. His face drained of color. His lips parted, but nothing came out. The audience turned as one, confusion twisting into horror. And there she was walking down the aisle, her arm linked with my father's, a white gown flowing behind her. The woman he had chosen over me was already promised to another, and worse, she was about to become family. The scene fractured into chaos. Whispers turned into shouts. Guests turned in their seats, unsure where to look, whose betrayal to process first. My father smiled, oblivious, as though parading his trophy bride. The groom's fists clenched at his side, every drop of color gone from his face. The woman's eyes darted between the two men like a cornered animal. I stood tall, a storm swirling in lace and silk, watching it all unfold. This was no accident. I had planned every moment. Let the world see the truth, it was their shame, not mine. But before I tell you how I set this trap, you need to understand how we got here. People don't just fall into scandals like this overnight. Betrayals build like cracks in glass, hairline fractures hidden until the whole thing shatters. When I first met Adrian, it felt like fate disguised as chance. I was standing in line at a small cafe, flipping through my phone, when a stranger bought my coffee and said, "Beautiful days shouldn't start with waiting." His smile was easy, disarming, the kind that makes you believe the world is lighter than it really is. From that moment, he wove himself into my life like it was always meant to be. Dinners, long walks, promises whispered against my skin. He was the man my friends envied, the man I believed in. Or so I thought. At first, the cracks were invisible. A late night here, a missed call there. He always had explanations, and I always wanted to believe him. Love makes you blind to the red flags waving in front of your face. But then came the perfume. A fragrance too sweet, too unfamiliar, clinging to his shirt when he returned from work meetings. He laughed it off, kissed my forehead, and told me I was imagining things. I swallowed the lie, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and once planted, doubt never stops growing. I started watching. Not obsessively, not at first. Just small things, receipts in his pockets, the way he guarded his phone like it held his soul, the way he suddenly had a taste for restaurants I'd never been invited to. Then came the night I followed him. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I trailed his car across town. My heart hammered with every turn, half hoping he was innocent, half dreading the truth. When he finally stopped, it wasn't at an office. It was at a hotel. And she was waiting for him at the door. Her name was Celeste. I didn't know it then, but she would become the center of the storm that nearly destroyed everything I had built. She was flawless on the surface, dark hair falling like silk, eyes that scanned the world as though it owed her something. Watching from the shadows, I saw the way she touched him, the way he leaned into her. My stomach twisted, but I didn't cry. No, in that moment, something inside me shifted. Instead of breaking, I began to sharpen. Betrayal didn't weaken me, it focused me. Days turned into weeks. I studied them like a detective in a case with no room for error. Every lie he told me was a thread, and I pulled until the entire fabric unraveled. But the deeper I looked, the uglier the truth became. Celeste wasn't just some fling. She wasn't just a passing mistake. She was entangled with my father. Business dinners, private meetings, secret phone calls, I pieced it together one by one. And when I realized both of the men I trusted most had let her into their lives, I understood this wasn't just betrayal. It was war. Yet war isn't won with rage alone. It requires patience, precision, timing. I didn't storm into his arms demanding answers. I smiled when he lied. I kissed him when he returned late. I asked no questions because silence is sharper than confrontation. Silence makes liars think they're safe. And while he thought he was spinning his web, I was quietly spinning mine. My father, blinded by vanity, had no idea he was a pawn. Adrian, drunk on desire, had no idea the stage was already being set. The final confirmation came one night when I slipped into his office while he slept. His laptop was unlocked, messages still glowing. And there it was, her words to him, "One day, she'll be gone, and I'll be standing next to you instead." My blood ran cold, but my lips curled into a smile. She wanted to take my place. She thought I'd vanish quietly. What none of them knew was that I was already crafting an ending where I was the one pulling every string. And so, when I walked down the aisle with Adrian months later, I wasn't walking toward a future I believed in. I was walking into the final act of a play I had directed. Every lie, every kiss, every betrayal had brought us to that church. And while they thought the story was theirs, it had always been mine. The morning of the wedding rehearsal, I stood before the mirror in my dressing room, veil draped across my shoulders like a secret. Everyone saw a glowing bride, flushed with happiness. But behind my calm smile, I was counting steps, planning moves, rehearsing lines for a performance no one would forget. Adrian thought he was marrying a woman in love. My father thought he was gaining a trophy son-in-law. Celeste thought she was just days away from replacing me. And none of them saw the storm I was about to unleash. The first part of my plan had been simple. Let them believe I was blind. I played the role of the doting fiancé, never questioning where Adrian disappeared to, never prying into his whispered calls. At the same time, I had been planting seeds, subtle remarks to my bridesmaids, casual comments to relatives. Just enough for whispers to circulate. I wanted an audience primed to suspect, but too polite to accuse. An audience that would be ready when the curtain finally rose. Celeste was harder to manage. She had a way of slithering into places she didn't belong, flashing that polished smile as though it excused the venom beneath. She attended the rehearsal under the guise of family business, sitting in the pews like a queen waiting for her crown. Our eyes met across the aisle, and for a heartbeat, the air crackled with unspoken threats. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she had already won. And that arrogance was the rope she would eventually hang herself with. In the weeks leading up to the ceremony, I had been collecting evidence, screenshots of messages, photos of secret meetings, even recordings of late-night calls. But paper proof wasn't enough. I didn't just want Adrian and Celeste exposed. I wanted them shattered in front of the very people whose approval they craved most. So I reached out to the one person who despised lies as much as I did, my maid of honor, Clara. Together, we devised the reveal. A projector hidden in the reception hall. A slideshow disguised as a wedding toast. A truth too heavy to deny. My father, meanwhile, was an obstacle I couldn't ignore. He had invested so much in Adrian, financially and emotionally, that tearing down his golden protégé would drag him down too. But that was the point. For years, he had treated me as an accessory, something to show off when convenient, dismiss when inconvenient. If exposing Adrian meant also cracking my father's carefully built image, so be it. I wasn't protecting him anymore. He had chosen his side the moment he let Celeste sit across from him at dinner and called her brilliant. The night before the wedding, Adrian came to me, smiling like a man who believed the world belonged to him. "Tomorrow," he whispered, brushing a kiss across my temple, "we start forever." I leaned into him, matching his warmth, letting him taste the sweetness of his final hours in control. "Yes," I murmured, my hand resting lightly against his chest. "Tomorrow changes everything." And it would, but not in the way he imagined. What none of them knew was that while they rehearsed their lies, I had rehearsed the moment they would be stripped bare. Every vow spoken at that altar would become a prelude to destruction. Every toast raised at that reception would become the introduction to their downfall. The trap wasn't just ready, it was already closing, one silent click at a time. The church bells rang, solemn and beautiful, their echo filling the air with the weight of tradition. Guests rose to their feet as the doors swung open, music swelling. I stepped forward in white, every eye on me. To them, I was radiant, a bride glowing with love. But inside, my heart wasn't racing with nerves, it was thrumming with anticipation. I wasn't walking into a marriage. I was walking into a war, and the battleground was lined with flowers and vows. Adrian stood at the altar, sharp in his suit, his smirk hidden beneath a mask of sincerity. His gaze swept the aisle like a man watching his prize approach. I knew what he saw, a woman who still believed his lies, who still thought forever meant her. But I also knew the truth waiting to rip that mask away. And as my father adjusted his tie and offered me his arm, I caught sight of Celeste. She sat in the second row, head tilted, lips curved in triumph. She thought this was the day she claimed her crown. The vows began, words as old as time. Adrian's voice didn't falter. He promised me devotion, loyalty, a love that could not break. Each syllable dripped with poison, and I let it wash over me, nodding, smiling, playing my role. Then it was my turn. I looked into his eyes and recited the words, but each one held double meaning. I promise to cherish honesty above all else. My voice rang clear, steady, and a few heads tilted in curiosity. He didn't notice. He thought I was still under a spell. When the officiant asked if anyone had reason these two should not be joined, the room fell into silence. For a heartbeat, I let it linger, let the weight of tradition press down. And then, like a blade through silk, I spoke. "I do." Gasps rippled through the church, a storm of whispers rising. Adrian's head snapped toward me, his eyes wide, his mask cracking. My father stiffened at my side, but I didn't look at him. My gaze was fixed on the man who had thought himself untouchable. Adrian tried to laugh it off, a nervous chuckle escaping. "Darling, what are you?" But his voice cut short when the screen at the back of the hall flickered to life. At first, it looked like a slideshow, sweet pictures of us. Guests smiled. Then came the messages, his words to Celeste, promises of nights together, plans to run away after the wedding. Gasps turned into outrage, shocked murmurs filling the air. And finally, the photo. Adrian and Celeste, tangled together in a hotel room, time-stamped just weeks before. All color drained from Adrian's face. My father's hand dropped from my arm, his jaw tightening as if the ground beneath him had given way. Celeste rose, face pale, but she froze when every eye turned on her. My lips curved into the faintest smile. "Sorry, Adrian," I said softly, every word sharp as glass. "But you said you couldn't marry me because she was your true love. Funny, since she's walking down the aisle today with my father." The silence that followed was volcanic. Adrian stumbled back, his lips trembling, searching for a defense that wouldn't come. My father looked between him and Celeste, realization tearing through him like fire. The guests, once witnesses to a celebration, were now spectators to ruin. And I, standing at the altar in my gown, was no longer the betrayed bride. I was the executioner. The church had turned into chaos. Voices clashed in the air, accusations, gasps, shouts. Some guests rose, some sat stunned, others whispered like wildfire through pews. Adrian stood frozen at the altar, stripped of charm, his face the color of ashes. The groom who once thought himself invincible was now a man undone by his own arrogance. And I watched it all, serene as the storm raged around me. Celeste tried to speak, her hand reaching toward my father, but he recoiled as though her touch burned. His expression was unreadable, the hurt in his eyes masked by a cold, rising fury. "Is it true?" he asked, voice trembling low enough that only the front rows heard. But silence spread like contagion, everyone straining to listen. Celeste stammered, It's not what it looks like," yet the proof still glowed on the screen behind her, undeniable. Adrian lunged forward, desperate, his voice breaking. "She means nothing, I was going to choose you." His words tumbled out, frantic, pathetic. He reached for my hands as though the gesture could erase everything. I stepped back. The crowd saw it, the rejection, and a collective murmur rose like a tide. Adrian's outstretched arms hung in the air, empty, as though he'd finally realized what I had always known. His grip on me was gone. My father turned then, his voice like thunder. "You brought shame into my house, Adrian. And you," his gaze cut to Celeste, trembling under the weight of it, "you dare to sit among us while deceiving me." His words cracked through the hall like Judgment Day itself. Celeste's composure shattered. She collapsed into her seat, covering her face as whispers hissed around her name. The queen she imagined herself to be had been dethroned before the court of society. I walked slowly, deliberately, down the aisle. My veil trailed behind me like the ghost of a marriage that would never be. Faces turned toward me, some in awe, some in pity, but none could look away. At the doorway I paused, turning just once. Adrian was on his knees, his suit wrinkled, his voice lost in a stream of broken pleas. Celeste sat crumpled, my father a statue of stone. And I, standing tall and white, was the only one unbroken. The doors closed behind me with a heavy thud, sealing their ruin inside. Outside, the air was crisp, fresh, a rebirth. The chaos of the church faded, replaced by the hum of city streets. I inhaled, the weight of years of lies lifted, and exhaled freedom. My wedding day hadn't bound me, it had liberated me. They would carry the shame, the scandal, the whispers. But I would carry nothing but silence and the strength of survival. And as I walked away, bouquet still in hand, I didn't look back. The altar that once promised me forever had instead become a stage where their true faces were revealed. Let them live in the ashes of their choices. I had my own future to build, and it would be written without them. He thought leaving me at the altar would humiliate me. But in the end, he was the one stripped bare in front of everyone. His lies, her betrayal, all exposed under the same roof where he thought he'd win. And me? I walked away with my dignity intact, while they stood frozen in shame. If this story gripped you, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next one.